Hi everyone. Welcome to our expert hangout with Lisa Sawchuk, who does financial organizing. I will apologize in advance. I know that my video is not exactly lining up with me talking, but such is what what we do here sometimes in the Google Hangout. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being with us. If you wouldn't mind, could you talk a little bit about what you do and give us, name your company and also give us the website so that people can visit it too if they're interested.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. This is my first official Google Hangout, so this is exciting. My name is Lisa Suchek, and my company is Timeline Organizing Consultants, and I provide financial organizing and business support services to small business owners. In particular, my niche are solopreneurs, that is solo entrepreneurs, aka business people who are all on their own running the show. And so my services include QuickBooks setup and training, bookkeeping, and setting up workflow in office systems. In other words, helping business owners decide how their work is going to get done. My website is www.timelineorganizing.com.
Awesome, thank you. So what are common problems that you're often fixing with these companies of one or two?
Yeah, the empires of one. Oh, where to begin? Well, a lot of, I'd say, 98% of my clients, particularly the creative types, they don't really enjoy the administrative or the back end part of their business, particularly the part that deals with accounting or finances. That's the very, very unfun part of their business. And so what do we do when we don't like to do something? We tend not to do it, right? And so that can lead to all sorts of problems down the line. Now, unless we're engaging in a jobby, that is somewhere between the job and the hobby, where you're making a little bit of money, not so much yet, and that happens, with some businesses in the beginning. But as you progress, you really need to start to treat your business as a legitimate business, a money-making enterprise, and in order to do that, you need to have your accounting systems in place. And so I help business owners set that up. Now, a lot of people, they'll start out with nothing, and okay, so there's work to be done in that area. Others will have been using some sort of maybe an Excel spreadsheet, and then I help them move on to something a little more sophisticated, say a QuickBooks. Others, they've got the shoebox full of receipts if they're keeping their receipts at all, and then come tax time, it's a complete and utter mess. And so I think we'll talk more about that. But just helping them create systems, because if you don't have your systems in place, particularly when related to money, you don't even know what's going on, and it can lead to issues like bills not being paid on time, tax time is a mess, and also that sense of stress and overwhelm, like how much money am I making in my business? Is it even profitable? I'm not even sure. And so if you don't have those systems in place, those questions can be really tricky to answer.
Okay. Well, so then kind of well, first of all, I've never heard of a jobby, which is
Yeah.
fun. I think our group especially is usually a lot of people who have kind of had the jobby and they're like, oh, now I really want this to be the thing that makes me money. And so
Absolutely.
that is the thing that it's kind of like transitioning from a jobby is a little bit like, like, how am I a big time business actually now? So, um, what are some steps so that people can take for organizing for tax time since that is coming up quicker than we
Right.
think?
Right. So tax time, and probably my question to my answer, initial answer to all of your questions will be set up your system. So I can't tell you how many clients I've had, and I pick up a lot of new clients, say the end of April, beginning of May, with like, never again. I'm never going through that horrible experience again of having to scramble and prepare my taxes and spend, sleepless night cobbling together some sort of, sheet of income and expenses from like literally a shoebox of receipts and scraps of paper. I have a client that I can think of who's it's a husband and wife team. They're photographers, and last year they paid literally thousands and thousands of dollars to their CPA to have their CPA essentially do data entry into QuickBooks. And so they would have saved a lot of money. And in fact, they did this year by having me do that work. And if they had done it to begin with, it wouldn't be an issue. So to prepare, first you need to have some sort of accounting system. Second, you need to have some sort of filing system where you're keeping track of those receipts that are coming in, especially the cash receipts that won't show up on your bank account. And then if you have your accounting software, say QuickBooks or something else you're using, if you have that in place, you have to enter the data regularly because it's not going to know what's happening unless you tell it. And then imagine that you have all the data entry in place, and then come March, April, imagine you're done. Maybe you look through your files to make sure you didn't miss any cash receipts to enter. But imagine that you're done. Send it to your accountant. If it's QuickBooks, you can send a QuickBooks file where they can go in themselves, and imagine you're done. Like, how awesome would that be? So it just comes back to having the system set up, doing the work regularly. I would say at least monthly, and for at the very least, don't go longer than quarterly if you don't have a lot of monthly transactions. Just be diligent about doing it, and then tax time will be not that awful at all. And then finally, if you know that you don't enjoy, the bookkeeping, the financial part, this is a really great area that you can outsource to a bookkeeper or to have somebody to help you. And the money that you pay, which may not even be as much as you're thinking, it's so worth it for the peace of mind and just knowing that the work is getting done, it's being done correctly, and you don't have to do it.
Just ballpark, what is, in your experience, a typical bookkeeper fee for somebody that's, a smaller-ish kind
Right.
of business?
So I've got some clients who they're typically, so some I do monthly, and it's maybe anywhere, depending on the number of transactions, maybe $175, $200 a month. And then some business owners who they don't have a lot of monthly transactions, some we only do quarterly. And again, a few $100, maybe $300 or so. Again, a lot of it depends on how much time it takes. And so big picture, if you divide it down by month and plus your time, towards the end of the year, that awful, week or 5 days when you're trying to put everything together, it can, many of my clients will find that it more than pays for itself.
Yeah, I think it's that difference between working in your business and working on your business. Like, if this is taking hours away from you actually making money and making the things that can grow your business, then it might be a thing that you want to outsource. Unless you wins at it, maybe. And
right. Well, what I always tell my clients is, let's say you're a crafter and you make jewelry or scarves or whatever. Can I make the jewelry for you? Not at all. Would I know how to make the scarves or the hand-dyed silk screen or whatever? Not at all. But bookkeeping I can do. So in other words, I always tell my business owners, you need to focus the bulk of your time on the work not only that you enjoy, but that's bringing in the money. But some of that back end or the administrative stuff, it's very important. It needs to get done, but the time can come when you're in a position to be able to get some help and to outsource some of that so that you can free up your time and your energy to focus on what you love, which I'm guessing is, the creating the things that you do in your business.
yeah, definitely. You kind of mentioned what a system sort of looks like that you should have in place, but can you maybe discuss any other sorts of systems that might be overlooked, or things that when people do these systems, why they often fall apart? Or
right. So, and a system, you say, like, well, what does that mean exactly? And there can be the physical components of it, but a lot of it is also up here, of just being clear on how your work gets done. So, for example, going to get the mail. You get the mail and you see, okay, there's some bills in there. Well, where do those bills go? Where do they physically go? Is there an in tray, an inbox? Do you have a slot for them? Okay, that's great. How do you, and I'm talking, it could be personal bills too, but I'm talking specifically about your business, your business bills, business expenses. How do you remember when they need to be paid? How do you track that? On the other side, when you make a sale, depending on if you invoice. I don't know how many of you would do invoices, or if you're doing some sort of sales order or just a receipt. If you're at at an event or something. All right, how do you track your sales? How do you enter that into your accounting system, assuming you have one? How about keeping track of things like sales tax? How do you know when it's time to pay sales tax? And I believe you're going to ask me about that in a little bit. But keeping track of all of those pieces, knowing where the physical pieces of paper go, so you need some sort of filing system, some sort of calendar, some sort of scheduling tool, and just an overall picture of knowing what goes where, how the work gets done, and when it gets done. And so probably the biggest part of that, especially if you're on your own, you don't have any help at this point, is scheduling the time in your calendar, literally writing it down to do some of these administrative, not so fun tasks like the bill paying, the invoicing or collecting the money, entering data into QuickBooks or your accounting system, looking over your bank statements, PayPal accounts if you're using that, and just getting a really clear picture on how much money you're making monthly and how much money is going out, aka are you running a profitable business?
Definitely. Kind of then going along that line, what are online resources, phone apps, things that are reasonably inexpensive and accessible, or maybe there's one thing that's kind of more expensive that you think is like, this is totally worth it. I know it sounds like a lot of money or whatever.
So there are a number. Now, most of the clients that I deal with who are a little more established, they generally will end up with QuickBooks, and so I'm a QuickBooks gal. It's what I know, it's what I teach. It's a great resource. It's if you're not familiar with it, it's probably the best known accounting software for small to mid-sized businesses. They now have an online version versus the desktop software, which they're really trying to push, and so there's a number of apps associated with that. So if you get to the point where you're really making regular sales, you want to start tracking your materials, your supplies, to get an idea of like, how much does it cost me to make this bracelet? When I use different stones or different gems or whatever, different materials, how much does it cost to make this bracelet? It's going to be really hard to track that unless you've got a good system, and QuickBooks can definitely help with that. And so there's a number of apps associated with that. It's not the only one though. There's something called FreshBooks, which is started out as and this is cloud-based, good for invoicing and for some basic tracking of your incomes and expenses. There's also one called EasyBooks, and some of these are a little bit simpler, I think, to start out with. EasyBooks is free, at least initially, and then you can pay to unlock certain features that you need. So that's a nice starting point, where maybe if you want just a really simple tracking system or a means to generate invoices, and then if you find you need other features, then you can pay as you go along. So that's one way that might work. Shoeboxed, if you're familiar with that, that is a cloud-based system that will store receipts, bills, documents. Now it works well with smartphones where you can take a picture of a receipt and it will store it in the cloud for you. They still, I believe, have the service from years ago where they would send you a physical envelope and you would dump all your receipts and paperwork and mail it off, and then they would take care of it in their center. But that's a nice way if you're trying to go paperless, but you need to keep those documents, in case you ever get audited or for your business. So that's one way to go. But what I will say with all of this, and especially with QuickBooks, if you decide that it's time to go that route, just get help. Just get help. Pay to have somebody help you set it up. They say, oh, it's so intuitive, you don't need an accounting background. Well, yes or no. It can be tricky to set up, and you want it to be done correctly, but once it is set up correctly, then it's basically an issue of data entry, which isn't too hard to do.
Right. I think you kind of nailed it a little bit, where it's not so much that it's something you can't figure out, or but it's more just like understanding how all of these things work together in your system, and being told like, this is what it looks like for you to do this. You do this, and then you put this input here, and then you have that kind of, like you said, sort of system where you're looking at all of these things, and then if you kind of get those directions once you know all of that, then I think it's easier for people to do where then they're just kind of like not familiar with this area.
Right.
And you're thinking like, okay, I have
What now?
where do I go? What do I do? What's the natural flow of this? Like how does a business actually do this?
Right, and I say that's human nature. Most of us are pretty good at following instructions, and what I tell my solopreneurs, in the networking group that I have, most of us are good if there's, the quote unquote big boss looking over our shoulder and say, Sharon, I need this report on my desk by Monday. Okay, you get the report on his desk by Monday or her desk by Monday, no issue. But the challenge is if nobody's looking over our shoulder, prodding us to get this work done or to set up the systems. And if there's a system in place, most of us are good at implementing and following it. It's the creation of the system. Like, well, I don't know, how do I do this? How does this work? Some people, our minds just work a little more easily. We're able to see the big picture where things should go. Others of us, we're kind of all over the place, and we need a little help. And once you get some assistance, either you're putting in the time to figure it out on your own or you get some help, you have the system in place. It's like, if you have a stack of papers, oh, okay, it was crazy weekend, here I am back in the office Monday morning, I know exactly where these papers are supposed to go. Then it's very easy to clean off your desk. But if there is no home for those papers, that's when they pile up because you don't know what to do with them. And that's just an example of once you have a system in place, it's pretty easy to follow it, or it should be.
Got it. Okay, going to that sales tax question, what is I think this is one that I feel like when you get in business as a maker, it kind of sneaks up on you the most, and is also the one that you're kind of constantly feeling like you're trying to figure out at some level. So,
right. And that comes, I think, from that graduation from a hobby to maybe a job plus hobby, meaning you're selling some, but it's still pretty much a side deal. You've got your regular job or the other things that you're doing. But as you become more busy, you need to make that step and decide, like, yeah, I'm a legitimate business. Or if you're selling online or on Etsy or at, craft shows or whatever, the time will come when you need to be in the sales tax system. And so if you haven't got to that step yet, what the first step is, you get a seller's permit. It used to be called like a reseller's license, and that's all of this is from the State Board of Equalization. So once you're in the system, then they will, in the interview process, or when you're setting up or registering your business, it will be determined based on your sales, your gross sales, how often you will be paying that sales tax. So it's typically monthly, quarterly, or annually. And then monthly is usually, for a higher level of sales tax that you're collecting. So at any rate, you'll get your schedule, and then you can go online, and then you register your business, and then you're officially in the system. And so that's a convenient way because you get email reminders when it's time to file and pay your sales tax. And then you essentially, there's some different components, but essentially you're putting in your sales for that period, and then it will calculate what the sales tax will be. So in order to do that correctly, you need to know what your sales were. And so that goes back to having a good system so that you're able to track your sales and track, your taxable, the taxable goods that you've sold. And so then you're able to file, it's like a sales tax return, and pay online. So like anything, it seems overwhelming, it's kind of scary. But once you've done it once, you know how to do it. You can reference, the prior report that you made, say, oh yeah, that's how you do it, and then you're on your way. So a few words of advice about that. Keep in mind that the sales tax that you're collecting, it's not your money, it's the government's money. So I've worked with some businesses that have really gotten in trouble because it's been a cash flow issue, and they're just trying to survive and keep the business going, and so they use that sales tax that comes in because it's money in their bank account, so they use it to pay bills or just whatever to keep the business going. But then come the time to pay their sales tax, they don't have it, and now you're behind, and now you're getting dinged with penalties, and it can really be an issue, and it can lead to a business going down because they don't forget about you. And that's the same with payroll taxes, sales taxes, really any sort of tax. So if you find that you are collecting, a fair, regular amount of sales tax, and you're able to, it's a great idea to get a second business bank account, maybe a business savings account, and just transfer that money, especially if you're paying only annually. And so if you're able to squirrel that money away and then it's there sitting, you don't touch it, and then when it's time to pay, it's there. And so it's not stress. You don't have to find the money to pay. It's already sitting there waiting for you. So I guess my advice would be accept the fact, maybe pat yourself on the back could be a way to look at it, that yeah, I'm at a level where I'm paying sales tax because I'm making all those sales and selling my wonderful items and collecting those tax, and then just get on board with the state board and then schedule when you need to make your payments and make sure that you're not spending that money beforehand.
Good advice. On that level then, what is the most important piece of advice that you would have for somebody that's running their own business financially?
Once again, the answer is set up your systems. Well, even before that, I would say, especially for artists, for creative types who sometimes aren't focused on the money necessarily. They're focused on, it's kind of like nonprofits, we're focused on doing what we love, our passion, creating this beautiful art, creating these goods. And sometimes we won't always necessarily focus on the business aspect, like, yeah, I want to make money on my business. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's, it's a means to be able to live our lives and set up the lives that we want. And so my point is, it's a good thing to focus on the finances and to focus on the money. And in order to do that, you need to set up your systems that we've talked about before. And by all means, get help if it's something you just don't want to spend all that time trying to figure out on your own, or if it's just not your background or your forte, get help with it. And then it can really lead to a sense of well-being and peace of mind to know that you have everything, that you're doing everything the way you're supposed to, and that there's nothing lurking in the drawers, or unpleasant surprises, taxes you're going to have to pay, forms you were supposed to file and you didn't even know about it. So get your accounting system, organize your workspace in terms of your files, your papers, your supplies, and then finally treat your business as a legitimate business. And part of that is paying yourself regularly, paying yourself a salary. And when you're starting out, you might say, I'm barely making anything. Everything's going back into the business. But in the early days, even if you're just paying yourself $100 a month, $50 a month, $25 a month, it gets into the habit of, it's almost a psychological trick of saying, like, yeah, this is a business. I'm going to generate income. I'm going to make my living from this. So I'm going to start to pay myself first and regularly. And it's amazing that when we really concentrate our energy in paying attention to the finances of our business, I've really found that it can help to, to open doors or to create a positive energy. And I've often found that more business, more sales will come your way.
Totally. So I think Tiffany asked a question a little bit back about the QuickBooks setup that I think you offer. I think she was wondering if that's a flat fee or how that works and what's the ballpark price range.
So something like that, typically it can be, it for the setup would be around, let's say like 200, setup and training, like 250, 300. It depends on the bulk of hours. But because here's the thing with QuickBooks, you want it set up correctly. And then what I always tell my business owners is you need to decide who's going to be doing it, who's going to be doing the actual data entry into QuickBooks. And I know a lot of owners are like, yeah, I'm going to do it. Okay, well, let's do some training. No, that's okay, I'll figure it out. So in other words, they don't end up doing that because they never learn. So my point is that we set it up, and then if it's worth the time to have a little bit of training to go with it. And again, it's once, like we were discussing before, once it's set up, it's basically an issue of data entry for most basic things, and every business is different. So if you have a service industry, a service business where you're invoicing, that might be different from, say, a crafters who are selling on the spot and collecting, receipts. And so the way that you enter your income might be a little bit different. And also, if you are ordering supplies or you're on credit, so in other words, you receive a bill, you have 30 days to pay it, say, versus paying, on the spot or paying in cash or on your credit card, whatever. There's a little bit of different way to enter those expenses. So my point is not to sound overwhelming, but every business is a little bit different, but you find out what is needed for your business, and then that's basically what I would teach you. I wouldn't tell you all the other stuff that you don't need to know. Um, but then you would be on your way, and then last but not least, you have to actually do the data entry. Otherwise, QuickBooks won't help you too much, but it's a great resource. Like anything, once you learn it, it can be very reassuring to know that all the information is there. For example, if I were to ask you, how were your sales last month in September? For a lot of people, oh, I don't know. I'd have to check PayPal, or I don't know. Let me check in the bank. Or if I were to say, how were your sales last September, a month ago, compared to September of 2013? Was there an increase? Was there a shift? Are you being able to see any patterns? And most of us would be like, I don't know. But with QuickBooks, you can run these reports in a second, and you're able to tell that information. So it's a great tool to have.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes we guess, like, I feel like I made more money anymore, and I don't think it's always an actual, like, oh, I ran the numbers and I actually knew this. It's like, oh, I just kind of feel like more money came in.
Yeah, like, I think I'm still buying food and surviving and clothing myself, so I think I'm doing okay. But another issue, I know we didn't ask about that, or you didn't ask about that, but another really important aspect when you're running a business, and again, getting past that point where, the hobby/jobby, where now I'm starting to really treat this as a legitimate business, is don't commingle your personal and your business funds. In other words, get a separate business bank account. And there's different banks have different deals, different fees. Some have no fees, some might have a small fee, but shop around for that. But it's really important, because when it's all mixed together, first of all, accountants don't like that, and it's really hard to track. What's going on? What are my legitimate business expenses? And then it's really hard to pull them out and put them in a separate tracking. So if you can, and a lot of us start out where we're all kind of mixed up, but then when the time comes, get a separate bank account with your DBA, doing business as, or if down the line you become an LLC or incorporate, then you would have to have a different account. But it's worth that extra step for sure.
Okay, good to know. Tiffany asked a couple other questions. I'm not sure to what degree they are in your field of expertise, but she asked about sales goals and a way to calculate those, and if any of those things you kind of do, like, I guess kind of looking what you did last year, but then you looked at what you did last year, and you're like, how do you figure out if that's even something you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's the areas of, like hitting your business goals, your targets, your income goals, and I think all of that is incredibly important to set those goals. They need to be realistic. Like, I'm going to make, $500,000, next year, because that sounds like a great number. Well, but if you're selling items that are only $10 each, that might be a little tricky, in your business model at the time being. But by all means, you can set a goal for yourself based on your current sales. Maybe you want to double them next year. But then the work with that is you can't just say, like, yeah, I want to bring in, instead of $30,000 on my business next year, I want to double it to 60. Well, okay, how's that going to happen? There's going to be other work in play. You're going to need to step up your marketing, maybe find some other channels to sell. There's going to be some other work involved with that. So that's where a business coach or somebody who's experienced with the sales funnel, with marketing, they can really come in to help you. And that's part of the whole picture of, as solopreneurs, we don't know everything. We have our areas of expertise, and you've probably heard it said where we wear a lot of hats. Not all of the hats fit very well, and we tend to not want to outsource because we don't want to spend the money, because we feel like we're not making all that much money yet. But you really have to come to the point where you believe in yourself and you believe in your business, and get help, whether it be designing a website or some help with marketing. And sometimes it doesn't need to necessarily be, you're paying somebody for like a year or for 2 years. Maybe it's just a couple sessions where you get some targeted help and expertise, and it can really, really make the difference between just kind of spinning your wheels and staying small and really moving forward and be able to grow.
I will say to that, Tiffany, that I did see in Tara Gentili's Creative Live. I remember. I think she has a whole plan of figuring out what your sales activities are, so you can kind of plan for growth and what numbers then that would kind of mean for you. So I think you could probably do it yourself, but it was more just the idea of like, okay, I want to hit this number. What are all the things I'm doing this month to hit this number? So I think it was based on like a monthly and even quarterly look at like what your activities would be. Like, I know I'm going to do this show this month, so I know I should make this amount of money, blah, 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 blah. Or I'm going to do more shows, or I'm going to plan to do other activities, email people, have sales that should increase whatever it is that I'm, the money I would like to make that month. So the other question she had was about tax deductions. Is that something that is in your realm at all?
Somewhat. I'm not a tax expert, but you're talking about deductions for your business?
Yeah, she said, what are the missed ones that makers and artists and designers often kind of overlook?
Yeah, and that's not particularly for makers or crafters. That wouldn't be my main area of expertise. You can always, I would do an online search for that. But with everything, it can depend on your workspace. There's different IRS rules about if it's in your house, if it's a separate room that you're able to declare that, or if it's like an open space and a shared space, sometimes you can't. So there's definitely rules there. But what I would suggest is you make a list of the things that are deductions, things that you think could be. Maybe mileage. If you're traveling a lot, going to shows. Certainly, that's why you want to have your seller's permit so that you can buy materials at cost. I would think that would make, wholesale. I would think that would make sense for a crafter to do. And either, if you have an accountant who does your taxes, you can definitely give him or her a call, and often they will, come tax time, they will help you work through that. And if you've got a good accountant, they will work with you to make sure that you're getting all of those deductions so that nothing is slipping through the cracks.
Okay. We did a hangout with a CPA actually a couple months ago. So it was Nicole Feldman, and she actually, her whole thing is she specializes in finding deductions like very strategically for entrepreneurs, and like she just will like deduct the heck out of your life. So you should go check out that hangout from a couple months ago. All right, well, thank you so much, Lisa. It was great chatting with you, and this was definitely some good knowledge. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, or if people wanted to email you or connect with you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun, and Tiffany, thanks for joining us live. And again, my name is Lisa Suchek. Last name is spelled Suchesk, and my website is timelineorganizing.com. And just send me an email. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to help if I could. So thank you, Sharon, for having me.
Thank you.